did it. Everybody woke up in time. Everybody listened. Everybody understands. Yes, it's going to be rough at the beginning, but we've done it.
Some views from Burnley there. Well, with me now, two historians, David Starkey and Kate Williams. From The Times, Tim Montgomerie, and the writer and equality campaigner, Paris Lees. Paris, what's your reaction as you watch that?
I recognise those towns. That's where I'm from, Evan. And I think these people are going to be really upset when they find out that they've been lied to. I think it's misguided. Obviously, the people have voted with good intentions, but I think we are being led down a very dark path.
Let's just ask whether the nation is in some way historically unusually divided. Kate, do you think we're in a unusual state?
I do think we're incredibly divided. I think this is the biggest historical event, I mean, the most divisive event since the Civil War, and I think it's the most historical event since we had the Act of Union itself. I mean, we see divisions here between North and South, between young and old, between the fact that Scotland is going to have a referendum, Northern Ireland, concerns about, Martin McGuinness is saying about joining together, and we know that a Scottish referendum is probably going to trigger questions about a referendum in Wales. So we're seeing massive divisions, and when we actually see a petition getting a lot of people's signatures saying that London might actually set up as a separate city-state.
I think it's a joke, though.
I'm not entirely sure.
I'm not entirely sure. I think there is. I mean, there is some joking in it, but there is some that I think shows the level of the divisions. It's huge.
You're both Remainers, and now you two are both Brexit supporters. David, do you think the nation is historically divided at the moment?
It is, but I think Kate is slightly exaggerating. I can think of Ireland. I can think of Roman Catholicism. I can think of all sorts of things that have split us. Even the whole question of whether we fought the Nazis or not. You know, the country was hugely divided. I think the more interesting question is why this has happened. And it seemed to me your Burnley film was absolutely right. What has happened is the European Union is a proxy. It's a proxy for deep discontent with experts, with the political class, and so on. And I think it's also the fact that the political parties have been led for the last nearly 20 years by leaders, Blair on the one hand and Cameron on the other, that have thought it was very clever to kick their supporters in the goalies.
Do we need to, if it's a proxy, was it the right thing to get out of it? If it's just a proxy, you're implying it's like, well, let's just kick something and that's the EU's over there, let's do that.
I think an awful lot of people actually voted on that basis.
Right.
And it's very important we recognise that, which of course also allows for the kind of point that Daniel Hannan was making, that perhaps we could begin to reunite as a very real possibility. And I think that what we've got to do is something which no recent government has had the courage to do. We've got to rediscover a sense of a national interest. Britain has spent the whole of its time arguing we've got to be good. We've got to support European rights because otherwise the Russians will misbehave. We've really got to start to do a de Gaulle.
Tim, is it the voters we saw there in Burnley are actually the ones political parties are finding it quite difficult to reach? Any political party, are they?
Boris didn't.
What is the answer to that? Because they're not natural Conservative voters. Your party's nowhere near them.
Sure, and you talk about Britain being divided, but I'm currently based in Washington for The Times, and I'm, of course, seeing the whole Trump phenomenon over there. We're all seeing the Trump phenomenon. And I think we're sort of 6-7 years after the global crash now. And I think immediately after the global crash, people just wanted governments that stabilised the situation. But now there's the hunger for reform and remedy. And I think we are seeing that right across the world.
Can I just make
today's revolt, yesterday's revolt by poorer Britons, and they were the overwhelming explanation for why we're leaving the European Union. That has to be heeded. This isn't just a vote to leave the European Union. This is a cry for help from a huge proportion of our population who think politics has stopped working.
And it is a vote against austerity, I absolutely agree. But when you think of places like Wales has got 500 million subsidy, huge votes against austerity. They talked about poverty. We didn't really see much talk about sovereignty in the same way. And the concern is that these people, it is not going to give them any, it's not going to improve the life of Burnley.
You're making a very elementary confusion. You're assuming that it's all... Yes, you are. You're assuming that the economy is always what mattered. What this vote shows...
But austerity is tied up with the economy.
What this vote shows is that it's culture that matters.
It can be.
Well,
And it
it's
can
like
be-
a politicians connecting with voters. If you look at Jo Cox, she was doing a good job of it. The SNP in Scotland is doing a good job of it. So I think that Labour and the Conservatives both need to put their hands up and admit that they're just not getting it right.
But sorry, your point about those voters in Burnley, they are, at the moment, they're floating voters. A Conservative leader who was as clever as Disraeli. Remember, it's Disraeli who captures the working man's vote in 1867. And there's the possibility now of a Boris or another charismatic Tory politician who invents the national interest.
Let's ask the Remainers whether you think Boris is a healing person.
I think Boris, his speech, it was just extraordinary. That wasn't a victory speech. I think he realises that he's got it wrong and that this is really, really, really serious. And I just hope that we can actually have another referendum, because I think a lot of people
Bad loser.
Well, Jonathan Powell said...
Well, I'd rather
I'm not sure
be a bad loser. I've got more important things
I'm not sure it is a bad
than
loser, because people actually feel that they have been lied to, and that's what
people have been lied to.
There's so much more voter regret than I've ever seen before. Most people say,
We're
OK,
now
this is
having a
this is
clear
idiot.
illustration of why the vote went why it did.
I think people are going to be surprised with Boris Johnson. He's probably the likely next Prime Minister of this country. Actually, you look at his record. He was championing the living wage before other Conservatives. Same-sex marriage. He opposed the tax credit cuts that George Osborne proposed. He's much more of an interesting Conservative than people think.
The Burnley divide and the metropolitan elite. Paris, what about the generational divide? Because that is really quite striking. The under-45s would have clearly voted to stay in, and the over-45s have clearly voted to take us out.
Well, there was a great headline on Vice today which said, "Grandma, what have you done?" And I think that a lot of millennials will be feeling that this morning. I think it's incredibly selfish, and I personally will not forgive or forget. Because the older generation don't have to live here as long as the younger generation do.
So are we going to introduce, for example, a cut-off point beyond which you can't vote? Are you reckoning... Your sense of sublime self-entitlement. Are we going to have those under 35 with 2 votes?
Hang on a minute. Young people have already had so much taken away from them. I don't need to take away my airtime as well, Mr. Starkey. So what we're actually looking at is a generation of people who've... Well, you're not letting me because you're interrupting me, because you're a privileged white man who just wants to speak over me. And this is the problem. Young people are getting very sick of it, sick of being spoken over, sick of being patronised. And we have to pay for our education in a way that your generation didn't have to. You know, we're just... Everything that gets taken away, young people are being cut out first. And I think there's a lot of frustration. And, you know, for young people, Europe's just somewhere where we go on holiday and go clubbing. You know, we don't have this xenophobia.
And the young vote is going to be vital in Scotland. Of course, the Scottish referendum included 16-year-olds. They were massive in the turnout. And I think that this is what we also... I noticed Nigel Farage saying, well, we can engage with the Commonwealth. But I've been watching the Australian media who have been saying today, why are we still linked to this country is going to be so diminished, they're going to lose Scotland, possibly Wales, then the Commonwealth is probably due for the top as well.
This is not what you're... Be careful what you wish for, is this kind of message.
I think at the moment, in our relationship with Europe, we have a situation where people from Africa, Asia, Australasia are actually second-class status when it comes to coming into Britain. We prioritise European. The problem isn't little Englandism, it is little Europeanism. Britain now has the opportunity to open ourselves to the world.
There won't be a Britain this time.
Thank you so much.
In 10 years.
That is about it. What a 24 hours it's been. Normally, we're meant to be the...